Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The throne room of Avalonia glittered with cold magnificence, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across polished obsidian floors. Queen Seraphine sat rigid on her throne, her pale blue skin a stark contrast to the midnight black of her royal attire. Before her stood Cale Mercer, former Imperial Pathfinder, now a smuggler with a reputation for finding what didn't want to be found. "The galaxy believes my daughter died in that crash 20 years ago," the Queen said, her voice carrying the artificial warmth of a practiced politician. "Her return will be a symbol of Avalonian resilience." Kyle's eyes flickered to the tall, thin figure standing at the Queen's right hand. Lord Valerian, royal advisor, his face a mask of aristocratic disdain. "Assuming there's anything left to return, Your Majesty," Valerian interjected smoothly. "Eden 7 is a preserved world for a reason. Nothing survives there unchanged." The Queen's expression hardened momentarily before the public mask slipped back into place. "That will be all, Lord Valerian." After the advisor departed with obvious reluctance, the Queen's demeanor changed instantly. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Listen carefully, Pathfinder. This is not just a rescue mission. Find her. If she is still my daughter, still Avalonian, bring her home. But if she has become something else—" Her eyes met his, unblinking. "Erase the mistake. No trace. No witnesses. The Crown cannot afford such a stain." Kyle's face remained impassive, but his mind raced. He was being hired not just as a tracker, but potentially as an executioner. "Full pardon for your past crimes, and enough credits to disappear forever," the Queen added. "Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly, Your Majesty." Kyle Mercer crouched in the dense undergrowth of Eden 7, studying the unusual markings on a gnarled tree trunk. 3 parallel gashes, too precise to be random, too high for any known native species. His gloved fingers traced the marks, finding residue that glinted blue in his helmet's scanner. "Avalonian blood," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "Fresh." The jungle around him pulsed with menace, a riot of toxic flora and predatory fauna that had claimed countless lives over the centuries. His once pristine environmental suite now bore the scars of 3 weeks in this hellscape: acid burns, thorn punctures, and hasty repairs. As he studied the markings, a sudden flash of memory hit him, screams echoing through a forest much like this one, but on a different world. In his mind's eye, he saw himself in Imperial Pathfinder armor, tracking what he'd been told were dangerous rebels. What he found instead was a family, parents and 2 children, trying to escape Imperial persecution. "They're civilians," he had protested over the comm. His commander's voice had been cold, emotionless. "Rebels take many forms, Pathfinder. Eliminate the targets, all of them." Kyle pushed the memory away, focusing on the present. He couldn't change the past, the hesitation that had cost those lives anyway, the disgust that had driven him to desert. But perhaps here, now, he could make a different choice. A snap of movement caught his attention. Through the dense foliage, he glimpsed a flash of pale blue skin. Kyle's heart rate spiked as he activated his helmet's thermal imaging. The heat signature moved with impossible speed, too fast for human reflexes, too deliberate for an animal. He followed, moving as silently as his Pathfinder training allowed, weapon at the ready. The jungle opened into a small clearing, and there she was. Princess Lyra of Avalonia, or what she had become. She moved with fluid, predatory grace, muscles rippling beneath pale blue skin that identified her Avalonian heritage despite everything else that had changed. Her hair was a wild tangle that fell past her shoulders, matted with blood and decorated with small bones. She was naked save for scraps of animal hide bound around her hips and chest. Her hands ended in what appeared to be natural claws, sharp enough to slice through the tough hide of her prey. She was crouched over a massive carcass, a ridge-backed herbivore twice Kyle's size, its chest cavity splayed open, ribs cracked outward like a grotesque flower. As she tore strips of meat with frightening efficiency, Kyle realized with sudden clarity she wasn't surviving on Eden 7, she was thriving. As if sensing his presence, she froze, her head snapped up, nostrils flaring. And then she turned, fixing him with eyes that burned with primal intelligence, eyes that assessed him not as a rescuer, but as a threat or potential prey. Kyle raised his hands slowly, his rifle pointed away. Princess Lyra. She moved faster than his eyes could track. One moment she was crouched over her kill, the next she was airborne, a blur of blue skin and unleashed fury. Kyle barely had time to throw himself sideways before she landed where he had stood, her claws tearing gouges in the earth. Not friendly. Got it, he muttered, rolling to his feet and bringing his rifle to bear. Lyra circled him, moving with a predator's liquid grace. She was calculating, measuring, deciding how to kill him. She lunged again, impossibly fast. Kyle fired, the pulse blast singeing the air where she had been a split second before. She was already moving, using the trees as springboards, changing direction in midair. His third shot clipped her shoulder. She snarled, a sound no human throat should make, but seemed more angered than hurt. Then she was on him, her weight slamming him to the ground, knocking the rifle from his hands. Her face was inches from his, teeth bared, a growl rumbling from deep in her chest. Kyle had one chance. His hand closed around the kinetic net launcher at his belt. As her claws reached for his throat, he pressed it against her side and fired. The net exploded outward, enveloping her in a web of energy-conductive fibers. She screamed, a high, piercing sound of rage rather than pain, as the net contracted, binding her limbs. She thrashed and rolled, snapping at the fibers with her teeth, but the net was designed to restrain creatures far stronger than a human. Mission parameters fulfilled, Kyle said into his comm, though there was no one to hear. Target acquired. He fashioned a crude travois from branches and vines, secured her still thrashing form to it, and began the long trek back to his ship. The sedatives he administered barely kept her subdued. Her metabolism burned through the chemicals at an alarming rate. When conscious, she was a hurricane of fury, straining against her bonds until her wrists bled. Another memory flashed through his mind. Standing over the bodies of that family, realizing what his hesitation had cost. His commander finishing what he couldn't. Weakness has no place in the Empire, Pathfinder. Kyle shook his head to clear it. This was different. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. If she's still my daughter, if she has become something else. Which was she? The feral creature strapped to the travois had little in common with the delicate princess from the hologram. But was that cause for execution? As Kyle navigated a particularly treacherous stretch of jungle, his water purifier beeped in warning, filter clogged, water contaminated. He cursed, checking his remaining supply. Less than a day's worth. He spotted a stream ahead, its crystal waters inviting. Kyle approached, scanner in hand, checking for toxins. The readings came back safe, but something about the water's perfect clarity made him hesitant. Behind him, Lyra emitted a sharp staccato growl. Kyle turned to see her struggling against her restraints, eyes fixed on the stream, making a jerking motion with her head away from the water. "What?" he asked, watching her repeat the motion. On impulse, he picked up a stick and tossed it into the stream. The water erupted into violent motion as invisible tendrils shot out, wrapping around the stick and dragging it beneath the surface. Not water at all, but a predatory organism that mimicked a stream to lure prey. Kyle stepped back, stunned. "You tried to warn me." Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw something beyond animal intelligence there, a calculated decision to save his life. Kyle tightened his grip on his rifle, counting the pairs of eyes. 8 sets, surrounding their position. Whatever they were coordinating, working as a unit. Not good. "Friends of yours?" he asked Lyra, who was staring into the darkness, her body tense but not with fear. The answer came in the form of a massive shape crashing through the underbrush directly toward their camp. Kyle caught a glimpse of armored hide and slashing claws before he opened fire, the pulse blasts illuminating the night in strobes of electric blue. The creature was enormous. A ravager, according to his briefing on Eden 7's fauna. 4 meters of muscle and natural armor, with a wedge-shaped head that was mostly teeth and rage. His shots seemed to irritate it more than harm it, the pulse energy dissipating across its armored plates. Kyle backed up, still firing, aware that he was about to die. The ravager charged, its footfalls shaking the ground. 10 meters away, 5, then 3. And then Lyra, still bound, emitted a sound unlike anything Kale had heard from her before. A high-pitched guttural cry that cut through the night like a blade. It wasn't a sound of fear or pain. It was a command. The response was immediate and shocking. From the darkness, the owners of those glowing eyes burst forth. 6-legged predators the size of wolves, with sleek, scaled bodies and jaws that could crush bone. Stalkers, the apex pack hunters of Eden 7. They moved with precision, not attacking the Ravager head-on, but harassing it from all sides, darting in to slash at its less armored underbelly before retreating. Kyle watched in astonishment. The Stalkers weren't trying to kill the Ravager. They couldn't. They were creating a diversion, drawing its attention away from Lyra, and they were dying for it. The Ravager caught one mid-leap, crushing it in massive jaws. Another was swatted by a powerful tail, its body broken on impact. But their sacrifice created an opening. With the Ravager distracted, Lyra made her move. She had been working at her restraints, using the sharp edges of a rock. Now, with a final wrench, she broke free. In a fluid motion, she snatched up a jagged piece of metal, a fragment of her own escape pod that Kyle had collected as proof of his find, and launched herself at the Ravager. She moved like liquid death, scaling the creature's armored back before it could react. The makeshift blade found the vulnerable spot at the base of its skull, driving deep with all the strength of her transformed body. The Ravager froze, then toppled, its massive form crashing to the ground with an impact that shook the earth. Lyra stood atop her kill, bloodied and triumphant. Around her, the surviving stalkers gathered, circling cautiously. Kyle raised his rifle, expecting them to attack next. But instead, they lowered their heads, making soft chirruping sounds. They were submitting. The truth hit Kale with the force of a physical blow. The tracks he had followed, the methodical kills, the coordinated movements of the stalkers. Lyra wasn't just surviving on Eden 7. She was thriving. She had become the alpha of a stalker pack, the leader of the most dangerous predators on the planet. Lyra turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. There was no gratitude for his attempted protection, no relief at being freed. There was only the cold assessment of a predator considering its next move. She wasn't his captive anymore. He was hers. The power shift was immediate and absolute. Kyle found himself in the position of the prey, the hunted rather than the hunter. Lyra approached, circling him with the same predatory assessment as their first encounter, but without the immediate hostility. She sniffed at him, studying his equipment with obvious curiosity. One of the stalkers growled, taking a step toward Kyle with clear intent. Lyra made a sharp sound, and the creature immediately backed down. She had spared him, at least for now. A faint, mechanical hum caught Kyle's attention. He glanced up, scanning the canopy with practiced eyes. There, a glint of metal, the telltale shimmer of stealth technology failing against the backdrop of bioluminescent foliage. A surveillance drone, military-grade. Watching them. "We have company," he said, lowering his weapon slowly, eyes still on the drone. "And I don't think they're here for a rescue." Lyra followed his gaze, her nostrils flaring as she detected the unfamiliar scent of metal and electricity. She snarled, her body tensing. The stalkers responded to her agitation, fanning out around the perimeter of the clearing. Kyle raised his rifle slowly. We need to take that thing down before it reports back. He waited for Lyra to make a move against him, but instead she watched him with curious intensity. Kyle aimed carefully and fired. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks, debris raining down through the canopy. Immediately, Kyle moved to recover the wreckage. The drone was unmarked, but he recognized the design. Stealth-capable, equipped with advanced sensors and a secure comms array. This wasn't standard search equipment. It was military-grade hardware used for high-value target acquisition. With practiced hands, he pried open the drone's communication module and accessed its memory core. The last received transmission was still in the buffer, encrypted but not beyond his skills to decode. His years as an Imperial Pathfinder had taught him more than just tracking. As the message decoded, Kyle's blood ran cold. It was a mission brief, addressed to an elite retrieval team. Target confirmed on Eden 7. Biological contamination, level Alpha. Asset is to be sterilized on site. Terminate any witnesses. Leave no trace. Queen's authority. Attached was an image. A grainy capture from another drone, showing Lyra atop her Ravager kill, surrounded by her stalker pack. "They're not coming to rescue you," Kyle said, turning to Lyra, who was examining the drone fragments with cautious curiosity. "They're coming to kill you, to kill us both." Lyra tilted her head, sensing the change in his tone even if she couldn't understand his words. She made a low, questioning sound. Kyle's comm unit crackled to life, making him jump. The voice that came through was cold, professional. "Pathfinder Mercer. This is Commander Vale of the Royal Retrieval Team. We know you found the target. Stand down and await extraction. The Queen appreciates your service." Lyra's head snapped up at the sound of the voice, her eyes fixing on Kyle with renewed suspicion. He quickly shut off the comm, but the damage was done. She backed away, a low growl building in her throat. "Listen to me," Kyle said urgently, holstering his weapon and raising his empty hands. "I'm not with them. I didn't know what the Queen really wanted, but I do now, and I'm not going to let it happen." To prove his point, Kyle knelt, exposing his neck in the submission gesture he had seen the stalkers use. It was a gamble, but it was the only language she fully understood. For a long moment, Lyra didn't move. Then, slowly, she approached. She circled him once, twice, sniffing at him. Finally, she reached out and, with one clawed finger, tilted his chin up to meet her eyes. There was a question in them, an assessment. Kyle held her gaze, letting her see his sincerity. She made a sound then, not a growl or snarl, but something softer, almost a purr. She stepped back and made a beckoning gesture. "Come with me." "We have to move," Kyle said, rising. "They'll be tracking the drone's last position. We need to set a trap." Lyra seemed to understand his urgency. She called to her pack with a series of vocalizations that had them falling into hunting formation. She led them deeper into the jungle, into areas Kyle had never seen during his weeks of tracking her. Here, the vegetation was denser, the terrain more treacherous. She moved with confident familiarity, signaling warnings when they approached particularly dangerous areas. Kyle used his portable scanner to intercept the retrieval team's communications. They were methodical, professional, their chatter revealing a team of 12 highly trained operatives led by Commander Vale, a man with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. But there was a second team as well. Valerian's operatives, moving in from the opposite direction, their communications more heavily encrypted. "They're closing in from both sides," Kyle murmured, shutting off the scanner. "We need to choose the battlefield. Force a confrontation on our terms." Lyra made a soft sound, then reached out to touch his arm, a gesture she had never made before. She pointed eastward, then made a flowing motion with her hand, followed by a chopping gesture. "East. There's something to the east." She repeated the gestures, more emphatically. Flowing, then a hard stop. A river? No, a canyon. There's a canyon to the east. Lyra nodded, her eyes bright with what could only be described as satisfaction. She was communicating, and he was understanding. A canyon could work, Kale mused, thinking tactically. Limit their movement, force them into a bottleneck. Lyra made another gesture, mimicking climbing, then pointed to her stalkers. The stalkers can climb the canyon walls, Kyle translated. We could set up an ambush. They set out for the canyon immediately. The journey was tense, both of them aware that two hostile forces were converging on their position. Twice they had to hide as drones passed overhead, their stealth systems good but not perfect against Lyra's enhanced senses. The canyon, when they reached it, was perfect for their purposes. Narrow, with high, jagged walls that the agile stalkers could navigate but would prove challenging for armored soldiers. At its center, the space widened into a clearing before narrowing again at the far end. A natural arena. We make our stand here, Kyle said, surveying the terrain. They'll come in from opposite ends, expecting to trap us. Instead, we'll be waiting. What followed was a strange but effective fusion of two hunting styles. Kyle showed Lyra how to create technological traps. Proximity mines positioned at narrow points, sensor scramblers to disrupt their targeting systems. In turn, she showed him how to use the environment as a weapon, which plants contained acids that could burn through armor, how to lure local predators to specific areas. The beta stalker watched their collaboration with obvious disapproval, occasionally challenging Kyle with growls and threatening postures. Lyra always intervened, but it was clear the beta considered Kale an intruder, a threat to his position in the hierarchy. As they worked, Kyle realized something remarkable was happening. Lyra was learning from him, not just mimicking, but understanding. She began to anticipate his strategic thinking, positioning her pack members at tactically advantageous points without being directed, and he was learning from her, reading the subtle cues of the jungle, understanding the social dynamics of the pack. Their preparation was interrupted by a distant rumble, not the sound of approaching soldiers, but something else. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Lyra tensed, emitting a warning call that sent the stalkers scattering for higher ground. "What is it?" Kyle asked, following her gaze to the far end of the canyon. His answer came in the form of a massive shape rounding the bend. Another Ravager, even larger than the one Lyra had killed days before. But this one was different. Metal gleamed at its joints and along its spine. Cybernetic enhancements. This was no natural beast. "They're herding it toward us," Kyle realized aloud. "Valerian's team, using it as a weapon." The augmented Ravager charged, its speed unnaturally enhanced by the cybernetics. Kale fired, his shots having even less effect than before, deflected by what appeared to be shield technology integrated into the creature's armor. He backed away, seeking higher ground, but slipped on loose rocks. The Ravager was on him in seconds, jaws open to deliver a killing bite. Kyle raised his rifle in a futile defensive gesture. The attack never came. The beta stalker had launched itself between Kale and the Ravager, clamping its powerful jaws on the cybernetic creature's exposed throat. The Ravager thrashed, trying to dislodge its smaller attacker, but the beta held on, dark blood spraying from punctured arteries. Lyra and the rest of the pack joined the attack, swarming the cybernetic monster. The beta maintained its grip even as the Ravager slammed it repeatedly against the canyon wall. When the massive creature finally collapsed, the beta lay broken beside it, breathing in labored gasps. Kale approached cautiously, the beta's eyes fixed on him, but there was no hatred there now, only the calm acceptance of a warrior who had chosen his death. He had protected the pack by saving Kale, acknowledging Kale's importance to their alpha. Lyra crouched beside her fallen lieutenant, making soft, keening sounds. She looked up at Kyle, her eyes conveying what her limited communication could not. Grief, respect, and a silent question. Kyle understood. He drew his sidearm and placed it against the beta's head. "Thank you," he said quietly, then pulled the trigger, ending the creature's suffering with a clean shot. The pack fell silent, acknowledging the sacrifice. Lyra placed a clawed hand on Kyle's shoulder, no longer the gesture of an alpha to a subordinate, but of one leader recognizing another. "They'll be here soon," Kyle said, returning to their preparations with renewed determination. "Both teams, let's make sure this wasn't in vain." They worked quickly, finalizing their preparations. Kyle set up what few technological traps he had: proximity mines, sensor scramblers. Lyra directed her pack to specific positions on the canyon walls, where they would wait, invisible, until the moment to strike. "They'll come in confident, expecting easy targets," Kyle explained, positioning himself behind a large boulder. "We let them get halfway through, then spring the trap from all sides." Lyra crouched beside him, her body tense with pre-battle focus. She had positioned her strongest stalkers on the high ledges, ready to drop down on the soldiers from above. The weaker ones were hidden in crevices along the canyon floor, prepared to dart out and harry the soldiers' flanks. They didn't have to wait long. The first indication of the retrieval team's arrival was the faint hum of their stealth gear, a sound so subtle that only Lyra's enhanced hearing detected it. She tensed, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Kale readied his rifle, checking the charge one final time. They came in a tight formation, 12 shadows moving with military precision. Their armor was matte black, designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their faces were hidden behind polarized visors, rendering them anonymous, inhuman. At their head walked Commander Vale, distinguished by the red stripe on his shoulder armor. He raised a hand, signaling his team to halt at the entrance to the wider part of the canyon. His voice, when he spoke, was amplified by his helmet systems. "Pathfinder Mercer, we know you're here. You've done your job well finding the target. Stand down now, and the Queen will honor her agreement with you. Full pardon, payment as promised." Kyle remained silent, watching from cover. Vale waited a moment, then continued. "The creature with you is not Princess Lyra. That person ceased to exist 20 years ago. What remains is a biological contaminant, a threat to Avalonian purity. The Queen has ordered its sterilization for the good of the royal bloodline. This is not a negotiation." Beside Kyle, Lyra tensed, her eyes fixed on the soldiers. Though she couldn't understand the words, the threat in Vale's tone was unmistakable. From the opposite end of the canyon, a second group appeared. A smaller unit, their armor sleeker, with the insignia of Lord Valerian's personal guard. They moved with the same precision but carried different equipment, capture devices rather than pure weapons. Vale spotted them immediately, his posture stiffening. "Valerian's dogs," he spat. "Looks like we have competition, men. Remember the Queen's orders. No survivors. No evidence." The leader of Valerian's team stepped forward. "The specimen belongs to Lord Valerian by order of the Imperial Science Directorate. Stand down, Commander." Vale's laugh was cold. "You'll have to take that up with Her Majesty." Kyle glanced at Lyra. "Perfect," he whispered. "They'll fight each other first." But Vale was too experienced to fall into such an obvious trap. He gave a sharp hand signal, and his team began to advance into the canyon, weapons raised. Valerian's team mirrored the movement from the opposite end. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat, secure in their technological superiority. That confidence was their first mistake. As Vale's team passed the narrowest point of the canyon entrance, Kyle triggered the first of his traps. The proximity mines detonated, not powerful enough to penetrate their armor, but sufficient to disorient and scatter their formation. In the chaos, 2 soldiers strayed too close to the canyon walls, exactly where Lyra had spread the sap of a particularly virulent plant species. The substance ate through their armor in seconds, then through the flesh beneath. Their screams echoed off the canyon walls. "Defensive positions," Vale shouted, his composure fracturing. "Find cover." But there was little cover to be found, and what existed was already occupied by stalkers waiting in silent ambush. As the soldiers scrambled for protection, the predators struck from above, dropping onto their prey with surgical precision. What the stalkers lacked in technological advantages, they made up for in numbers and savagery. Kyle emerged from cover, his rifle picking off soldiers with the practiced accuracy of his Pathfinder training. Beside him, Lyra was a blur of motion, her transformed physiology making her faster and more lethal than any human opponent. She moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, striking and retreating before the soldiers could bring their weapons to bear. Valerian's team, caught in the crossfire between Vale's soldiers and the stalker pack, fell back to a defensive position. Their leader shouted into his comm unit, "Lord Valerian, we need extraction. The asset is too well defended." But the retrieval team was elite for a reason. They recovered quickly, their training reasserting itself. They formed a defensive circle, using their superior firepower to keep the stalkers at bay. 3 of the creatures already lay dead, their bodies smoking from energy weapon impacts. Vale himself was a formidable opponent. He spotted Kale and charged, his powered armor giving him enhanced strength and speed. Kale fired, the shots glancing off Vale's reinforced plating. Then the commander was on him, knocking the rifle from his hands and sending Kyle sprawling. "Traitor," Vale spat, standing over him. "You were one of us once, an Imperial Pathfinder, and now you side with beasts against your own kind." Kale rolled, narrowly avoiding the stomp of Vale's armored boot. "My kind abandoned me," he grunted, scrambling for his sidearm. "Just like the Queen abandoned her daughter." Vale laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Is that what you think this is? A rescue mission gone wrong? The Queen never wanted her back, Mercer. The princess was an embarrassment even before her crash. Weak, sickly, a genetic throwback. The crash was convenient. Finding her like this, corrupted by this world, even better. The perfect excuse to erase a problem." The revelation hit Kale like a physical blow. The Queen hadn't just sent him to find a daughter she feared had gone feral. She had sent him to eliminate a child she had never wanted in the first place. Vale raised his weapon, aiming for Kale's head. Nothing personal, just completing the mission. A shadow fell across them. Lyra, launching herself from a nearby boulder. She collided with Vale with the force of a meteor, the impact sending them both rolling across the canyon floor. Vale's armor gave him protection, but Lyra's fury gave her speed. She was on him again before he could recover, her claws seeking the vulnerable joints of his suit. "Lyra!" Kale shouted as Vale managed to throw her off, drawing a vibroblade from his belt. "His neck! The armor is weaker there." Whether she understood his words or just his intent, Lyra adjusted her attack. She feinted, drawing Vale's blade in a wide arc, then ducked under his guard. Her claws found the seam between his helmet and chest plate, tearing through the reinforced fabric beneath. Vale's scream cut off abruptly as blood fountained from the wound. Around them, the battle was turning. The stalkers, under Lyra's leadership, had adapted to the soldiers' tactics, attacking in coordinated waves that prevented the team from bringing their full firepower to bear. Kale had rejoined the fight, using Vale's own dropped weapon against his men. Valerian's team attempted to retreat, but found themselves cut off by a group of stalkers. Their leader raised his hands in surrender. "We're not here to fight. We can offer protection. Lord Valerian can—" His plea was cut short by Lyra's claws. Her message was clear. There would be no deals, no compromise. This was her territory, and all invaders would meet the same fate. One by one, the soldiers fell. Some to Kyle's shots, others to the stalker's claws and teeth. By the time the canyon floor was bathed in the red light of sunset, only one member of the retrieval team remained alive. A young soldier whose helmet had been torn away, revealing a face barely out of adolescence. Kyle approached him, Vale's weapon held loosely at his side. The soldier looked up, terror and defiance warring in his eyes. "Tell the Queen," Kyle said, his voice hoarse from the battle, "that her daughter is dead, that we're both dead. that there's nothing left on Eden 7 but monsters. Can you do that? The soldier nodded frantically. Kyle gestured toward the canyon entrance. Go, run. Don't look back. As the soldier scrambled away, Lyra appeared at Kyle's side. She was bloodied but unbowed, her eyes bright with the exhilaration of victory. Around them, the surviving stalkers were already beginning to drag away the bodies of the fallen soldiers, food for the pack. Using the comms unit from one of Valerian's men, Kale uploaded the evidence he'd gathered. The intercepted messages, proof of the dual conspiracy against Lyra. He set it to broadcast on the Royal Guard frequency, ensuring that when the Queen arrived, her own protectors would have questions about whose agenda they were truly serving. We beat them, Kyle said, allowing himself a moment of relief. But it's not over. The Queen won't stop. Not when she thinks there's a chance her secret might get out. Before he could say more, a low hum filled the air, the unmistakable sound of a ship's engines. Kyle looked up to see a sleek, ornate vessel descending toward the canyon. It was unlike the military craft the retrieval team had arrived in. This ship bore the royal insignia of Avalonia. The Queen, Kyle breathed, disbelief coloring his voice. She's come herself. Lyra growled, dropping into a crouch. Around them, the stalkers responded to their alpha's tension, forming a protective circle. But Kale knew that against a royal shuttle's weapons, they would stand no chance. Yet the shuttle did not open fire. Instead, it settled gently at the canyon's entrance, its landing struts extending to accommodate the uneven terrain. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the main hatch slid open, and a ramp extended to the ground. The woman who emerged was exactly as her holographic image had suggested. Regal, cold, perfect. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow in the fading light. Her white blonde hair elaborately styled and adorned with jewels that caught the sun. She wore a gown of some flowing material that moved like liquid around her, and her face was a mask of aristocratic disdain as she surveyed the carnage before her. The Queen of Avalonia had arrived. Behind her came her royal guard, 6 soldiers in ceremonial armor that Kyle knew was as functional as it was decorative. They flanked their monarch, weapons at the ready but not yet raised. The Queen's eyes found Lyra immediately, widening fractionally at the sight of what her daughter had become. Lyra stared back, her head tilted in that curious way Kale had come to recognize as her trying to place something familiar. "So," the Queen said, her voice carrying clearly across the canyon. The reports were accurate. How unfortunate. Kyle stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Lyra. "Your Majesty," he said, the formality feeling strange in his mouth after weeks in the jungle. "Your daughter is alive. Changed, yes, but alive. She's intelligent, adaptive. She's learned to survive in the most hostile environment in the galaxy. That's not unfortunate. It's miraculous." The Queen's laugh was like ice cracking. "Miraculous. Look at her, Pathfinder. Look at what she's become. That is not my daughter. That is not an Avalonian princess. That is an animal. A contamination." Behind him, Kyle heard Lyra's low growl. She understood, if not the words, then the rejection they conveyed. "She kept your locket," Kyle said, his voice hard. "All these years. She couldn't remember who you were, but some part of her remembered that you mattered." For a moment, something flickered across the Queen's perfect features, a hint of emotion quickly suppressed. A trinket, nothing more, a primitive collecting shiny objects. "You never wanted her back," Kale pressed. "You sent me to find her so you could erase her. Why? Because she wasn't perfect? Because she was an embarrassment?" The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You forget yourself, Pathfinder. I'm not accountable to you. My reasons are my own, and they are irrelevant now." She raised a hand, her jeweled fingers glittering in the dying light. "That creature is not my daughter. It's an animal, a contamination." Her voice rose, addressing her guards. "Kill it. Kill them all." The royal guard raised their weapons, their movements synchronized and fluid. Kyle tensed, ready to dive for cover, knowing it would be futile. The guards' weapons were designed to penetrate armor. They would cut through flesh and bone like paper. But before either side could act, Kyle made a decision. He turned to face Lyra, meeting her wild, intelligent eyes. Then, deliberately, he lowered his weapon. He dropped to one knee before her, in full view of the queen and her guard. And he bowed his head, exposing his neck in the ultimate gesture of submission. It was a declaration that needed no words. He was acknowledging her not as a princess to be rescued, but as a queen in her own right, the ruler of this savage domain. He was placing himself under her protection, joining her pack, choosing her world over the one that had rejected them both. Lyra understood. She stepped forward, placing one clawed hand on his shoulder, the gesture of acceptance he had seen her use with her beta stalker. Then she turned to face her birth mother, and she made a sound, a high, ululating cry that echoed off the canyon walls. The response was immediate. From the canyon rim, from behind rocks, from the shadows of the jungle beyond, came her subjects. Not just the handful of stalkers that had fought beside them, but dozens more, an entire pack, perhaps the largest on Eden 7. They positioned themselves around Lyra and Kyle, a living barrier of teeth and claws and unwavering loyalty. The queen took an involuntary step back, her perfect composure cracking. "What is this?" "This," Kyle said, rising to stand beside Lyra, "is her kingdom, and we are her people." The guard hesitated, looking to their queen for guidance. They were outnumbered, surrounded. Even with their superior weapons, they could not prevail against such numbers in close quarters. The queen's face was a mask of horror and disgust. This wasn't the daughter she had lost. This was a monster, a failure, a stain on her legacy. And yet, impossibly, this creature had built something the queen herself could not claim. Absolute loyalty, absolute devotion from her subjects. "That is not my daughter," the queen said, her voice echoing in the canyon, cold as space. "It's an animal, a contamination." She raised her hand, pointing a jeweled finger. "Kill it. Kill them all." The guard raised their weapons, prepared to die in service to their monarch. But Kyle had made his choice. He stepped forward, standing tall beside Lyra, and he let out a sound, the challenge cry of the stalker pack, a guttural roar that he had learned from her. It was not the sound of a human anymore. It was the declaration of a pack member, of a hunter who had found his place. He was not returning to her world. He was staying in this one, with his new pack, with his alpha, with his queen. The savage sound echoed across the canyon, a bridge between worlds, the world of technology and civilization that had betrayed them both, and the world of primal truth that had accepted them. In that moment, as the sun set on Eden 7 and two queens faced each other across a battlefield of their making, Kale knew that whatever happened next, he was finally where he belonged.